The Grenlec Debates, powering bright ideas.
We are down to the final four of the 10th season of the Grenlec Debates. Welcome. In this competition, we challenge our debaters to convince the judges and their audience, regardless of their personal beliefs, about the motions they're asked to debate. The theme for the semifinals is migration. Both areas continue to come under increasing focus as our nation endeavors to meet its development goals. I am your chairperson, Eric Williams, and I call this House to order. The motion: be it resolved that developed countries should not accept skilled migrants from developing countries. For the proposition, Hillsborough Secondary. For the opposition, St. Joseph's Convent, St. George's. The first speaker for the proposition will open the match.
Morning all. We propose the motion, be it resolved, that developed countries should not accept skilled migrants from developing countries. We define terms: Collins English Dictionary, skilled, having or requiring ability, as in a particular industrial occupation, gained by special experience or training. Migrant, a person who moves from one place to the other, especially in order to find work. Collins Cambridge Dictionary, Cambridge Dictionary should use to express a desire or opinion. World Bank, developing countries, now classified as low and middle income countries, are countries with per capita gross national income of $12,235 or less. Developed countries, now classified as high income countries, are countries with per capita gross national income of $12,236 or more. I will show the effects of skilled migration on developed countries. Our second speaker will employ various perspectives, including a theoretical one, to show why skilled workers of developing countries should not be accepted in developed countries. Judges, empirical studies and policy experiences do not support optimistic views of migration. We will show that instead of decreasing, migration is now seen as increasing spatial disparities in developmental levels. The current wave of economic globalization has opened a window of opportunity for human capital to agglomerate in the most economically advanced countries. People are risking their lives, Honorable Chair, in pursuit of prosperity, opportunity, possibility, a better life. Possible in a world of perfect competition with complete markets. The free mobility of labor would seem to be Pareto improving. Migrants receive higher incomes. Natives in receiving countries share immigration surplus. Residents in sending countries benefit from the rise in land or labor, and capital or labor ratios. Rapporteur 2005. But Honorable Chair, the world, not a utopia. The Center for Immigration Studies 2012 U.S. Census data 2011 concludes, and I quote, immigration has dramatically increased the size of the nation's low-income population. Moreover, immigrants who have lived in the U.S. for 20 years are likely to live in poverty, lacking health insurance, and access to welfare system than native-born Americans, unquote. Far from utopia. Illustrated Encyclopedia of Knowledge, volume 16, under the title The Movements of People, states, and I quote, migration to developed countries have introduced a variety of social strains in developed countries. This includes pressures on housing, healthcare, education, and transport services, unquote. Judges, with positives to migration are grave negatives to be considered. White resentment, migrants' exploitation, and family separation, and large-scale immigration can pose serious challenges to a nation's identity. Britain population growth does not benefit the British-born. Immigration burdens schools, hospitals, housing. Honorable Chair, 3 countries, Japan, Spain, Czech Republic, that relied on low-skilled immigrant workers have recently introduced a voluntary return program known as Pay to Go, Maccabi et al. 2009. Developed countries no longer need to play a role in depleting the human resources of developing countries. Hooray to that! Statistic 2016 in the journal, ethics and global politics shows Norway, a developed country, training domestic workforce to avoid relying on immigrants. The UK introduced legislation to hire European medical graduates. This will help developing countries to retain their skill capital. The World Conference on Human Rights, June 1993, reaffirms that developed countries should be supported by the international community to succeed in their transition to democracy and economic development. This is why developed countries should not accept skilled migrants. I thank you.
A warm welcome for the first speaker for the opposition.
Honorable judges, audience all, good morning. We refute our opponent's definitions. My team stands in opposition of the moot. Be it resolved that developed countries should not accept skilled migrants from developing countries. I will define key terms in the moot and provide evidence as to why developed countries should accept skilled migrants from developing countries. My colleague will illustrate the advantages to both. According to the International Organization for Migration, or the IOM, a skilled migrant is any person who has certified training, knowledge, and ability in a given field and moves across international borders or within states, regardless of the length of stay. The UN Development Index and the World Bank assert that a developed country is one which is highly industrialized with a diverse population and workforce, therefore, a high income per capita. Accordingly, they enjoy superior education, healthcare, and thus longer life expectancy, making them less prone to epidemics. Conversely, developing countries are less industrialized with limited production of their own goods and services. Their population density is higher, inevitably creating substandard educational and health institutions, lack of social safety nets, vulnerability to climate change, and susceptibility to civil unrests. Judges, having all ascribed to the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals, UN member states can be considered as a global village with common aims. These are the alleviation of poverty, reduction of the effects of climate change, and the elimination of warfare. With their expansive access to the world's resources, it is the developed countries' legitimate and humanitarian duty to accept legal skilled migrants with an effort to improve life and, by extension, promote the sustainable development of all nations. Secondly, refusal to accept skilled migrants from developing countries symbolizes discrimination and a violation of the UN International Human Rights Convention. The UN Convention on the Protection of the Rights of Migrant Workers states that legitimate migrants and their families shall be free to emigrate from any country with regulations. Thus, refusal to accept skilled migrants will have breached the Human Rights Charter. Remember, developing countries, likewise developed nations, are signatories of that convention. Thirdly, according to the International Monetary Fund 2016 study, the impact of migration on income levels on advanced economies, accepting skilled migrants will increase the GDP per capita of developed countries up to 2% annually, particularly those with aging populations and rising educational levels. Native workers tend to opt for white-collar jobs. Hence, job shortages are bound to occur, and high and low skilled migrants offer a ready pool of trained workers to fill in these gaps. They can bolster productivity per worker by motivating native workers to perform at their maximum capacity by induced competition. The IMF also affirms that a diverse workforce can generate new ideas and innovations because of skilled migrants' varying perspectives. Therefore, the integration of skilled migrants into developed labor markets is critical for sustainable development. Furthermore, the refusal to accept skilled migrants may subject a worker to an impoverished life when legitimately that individual has the skill to improve his social status. Skilled migrants have viable contributions to make and thus require the platforms to do so. If they are restricted, the world would lose significant talents. Moreover, let's not be blind to economic realities. We know that our governments cannot provide job opportunities for every skilled worker in society. We must acknowledge, based on the 2017 Organization of American States and IOM regional report, that there are some challenges with migration. However, according to the OAS and IOM, with proper regulations aimed at improving migration governance, all challenges that may arise can be overcome. It will be foolhardy to terminate a system that benefits all. Let's work towards its sustainability. I thank you.
Please welcome the second speaker for the proposition.
Human resources is the most valuable asset the world has. Eleanor Roosevelt. Morning all, we stand by your definitions. United Nations Statistics 2016, 244 million migrants living abroad worldwide. 1990 US Census, above 2.5 million highly educated migrants from developing countries reside in the US. Presently, more African scientists and engineers working in the US than in all of Africa. International Organization for Migration. In Zambia, the number of practicing doctors reduced from 1,600 to a mere 400. IOM estimates $9 billion lost in human capital and growth potential since 1997. Honorable Chair, consider the rippling effects on developing countries. Migration aggravates problems of underdevelopment. Bird and Papadimitriou 1985 argues, in sending countries, migration depletes the already mega supply of skilled migrants. As skilled migrants are contributors to the government budgets, this increases the fiscal burden on those left behind and adds a substantial negative impact on low-skilled workers' productivity and wages, resulting in domestic inequality. The ripple effects goes on, Honorable Chair, as this human capital depletion impacts negatively on countries' growth prospects. That bearing in mind that human capital formation is a central engine of growth. In addition, Fujita et al. 1999 states, and I quote, skilled labor is instrumental in attracting foreign direct investments, fostering research and development expenditures. So then the mobility of the human capital is contributing to the concentration of economic activities in specific locations at the expense of developing countries, unquote. Brain drain? Indeed, Honorable Chair. The push and pull factors leaving the economy of the sending country as dry as the hills of Gilboa. What the judges? Crippling conditions. Developing countries has paid for their skilled immigrants' education to aid in the local economy and health services. No, the investment in educating them wasted. Migration of manpower from a trying to make it developing country to an affluent developed country, Honorable Chair, and acts of treason and theft. Developed countries should not accept skilled migrants from developing countries. They are needed at home. Opponents may force the arguments of remittances to make up for the dearth of skilled workers. What remittances? How does this benefit developing countries when more than 90% of remittances are spent on everyday consumption? Lipton, 1995. Consumption that does a little to boost domestic production, employment, or exports, and increases market volatility and inequality. Taylor and Adelman, 1995. Remittances opponents? Insignificant. When we consider the strain experienced on developed countries, consider the detrimental effects on developing countries, consider that the aim of any developing country is to be developed. The crucial factor in engineering is human capital. How then can it be acceptable for developed countries to accept migrants from developing countries? I thank you.
We invite the second speaker for the opposition.
Good morning to all. I maintain all definitions advanced by my first speaker. According to the UN Migration Agency, skilled migrants emigrate to build their capacity, increase knowledge, and enhance skills through higher education and training opportunities. They, in turn, are better able to contribute to the development of their countries of origin while still making a meaningful and impactful contribution to the host country. The benefits, therefore, for both the developed and developing countries through the process of brain circulation cannot be overemphasized. The UK National Institute of Economic and Social Research reports that skilled migrants tend to be self-employed. As their businesses develop, they generate employment. Many migrants create ethnic enclaves with vibrant businesses. These firms contribute significant revenue towards the developed country's GDP. In addition, these skilled migrants facilitate backward linkages with their home countries in terms of trade, transfer of culture, and technologies. Some pertinent examples are Shepherd's Bush markets, where Caribbean food is imported, and Leicestershire, where authentic Indian products are purchased. Indeed, the backward linkages from skilled migrants serve as a profitable resource for the development of all nations. Additionally, skilled migrants' earnings in the developed countries are then transferred into remittances. They send home monies to further develop their countries of origin. According to the World Bank, remittances worldwide were estimated at $483 billion in 2011. In Grenada, the Statistical Office noted that in 2016, net remittances were 78.42 million EC dollars. Judges, the World Bank 2011 study has concluded that a 1% increase in the share of remittances in a country's GDP leads to a 0.4% decline in poverty. Isn't this commendable? Undoubtedly, the UN sustainable goals are being achieved when this capital is reinvested in other key sectors such as healthcare and education. Furthermore, we must ardently state that a brain that has physically left its country is not a brain that has been lost. According to IOM, brain circulation allows for skilled migrants to advance their wealth and expertise. They, in turn, contribute to the development of their homelands. For instance, Grenadian-born Mr. Earl Brathwaite, a US-based IT innovator and entrepreneur in Silicon Valley who has created numerous patents. He provides consultation as a member of the board of directors of the GIDC. Additionally, he has provided financial support to Grenadians through various philanthropic activities. Would he have been able to accomplish these feats if he had never left Grenada? Many skilled migrants in developed countries are employed in the health sector, such as Grenadian-born Dr. Trevor Lane, a US-based oncologist. In addition to practicing in these developed countries, sophisticated resources are used to aid in diagnoses and treatments. Worthy opponents, we have provided significant evidence to show that developed countries should accept skilled migrants from developing countries. To terminate a system that works is imprudent in this era of sustainable development. I thank you.
During the cross-examination, we invite teams to question each other about relevant issues. The rebuttal speakers dissect their opponent's arguments and expose weaknesses.
Worthy opponent, if skilled migrants are not accepted, are you suggesting that unskilled migrants are more valuable than skilled migrants? Or are you suggesting that all migration should cease?
No, worthy opponent. We are saying because of the severe socioeconomic impact that accepting skilled migrants...
Worthy opponent, that's not what I asked.
Worthy opponent, let me answer. Because of the severe socio-economic impact that accepting the skilled migrants from developing countries would have on both the source countries, the developing countries, the developed countries, and also the migrants themselves, that they should not be accepted.
My worthy opponent, that is not what I asked. I asked if you should accept the unskilled migrants, or if you're going to not accept any migrants at all.
We never said that you shouldn't accept any migrants.
So
we never said that you should accept unskilled migrants either. You are misappropriating our stance, worthy opponent.
Skilled or unskilled. No matter the level of skill, it is skilled or unskilled. So if you do not suggest that you accept the unskilled ones, then who are you going to accept?
There are still skilled migrants from the other developed countries, are there not?
They are, but to cease the migration from developing countries on a whole is the answer.
We cease migration from developing countries to developed countries because this migration limits economic growth.
Proceed? The UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs states that one of the key inhibitors of economic growth is a lack of private investments. Wouldn't an increase in the population of the private sector help to alleviate this?
In which country are you referring to?
The United Kingdom, as well as the United States of America, as well as many other developed countries.
So you're speaking about developed countries, but what about the developing countries? Have you considered the effects that it would have on the developed countries?
That's not the question I have posed to you, my worthy opponent. Would an increase in the population of the private sector help private investments into the rest of the economy?
But an increase in the private sector, these people are not even guaranteed a job. In most cases, they're actually in poverty.
You still have not answered my question.
With the opponent, these persons do not necessarily have a job when they go to the developed country. They are mostly unemployed, they are underemployed. It is best that they stay in their developing countries to develop their own country.
The point I am trying to bring across is that the UK National Institute of Economic and Social Research stated that most skilled migrants in developed countries become self-employed, which will add to the population of the private sector, which, according to the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, needs to invest more into the economy.
But what about the repercussions for the developing countries?
With the opponent, we will get to that. With the opponent, the International Labour Organization states that migration of skilled persons is key in addressing work deficits for ending world poverty, thus helping to achieve the 2030 UN Sustainable Goals. How can you disagree with this?
With the opponent, because when these skilled migrants leave their developing countries, because the developing countries have a scarce human resource capital, this seriously disadvantages. Your speaker stated that the developing countries gain billions of dollars from remittances. But do these remittances compensate for the loss due to the brain drain in the first place?
Brain drain is a very old theory, as when people leave their country, they're not leaving their country without anything. They contribute through technological transfer, they raise awareness as well as remittances.
But still, they seriously disadvantage their origin country due to the loss in growth potential.
But they cannot be gainfully employed if they stay in the developing country.
Why not?
Because the government will not have finances to employ them.
But
because of the IMF attrition policy, for every group of professional that leaves, only a small amount come back. They cannot be employed.
But the government is not the only employer. These persons are skilled, and by that very nature, they can be innovative and creative and create employment for themselves.
Will they have enough capital to be innovative?
With the opponent, as a skilled person, you can also use your links with foreign persons to develop your businesses. So this is not an issue. What the opponent, what evidence do you have that the remittances do compensate for the loss?
The remittances may not compensate, but there are other factors which the migrants will contribute back to their home country, which can collectively aid.
Well, if it does not compensate, then that means there's a net loss. There is a net loss for the developing countries.
It is not a continuous loss, my worthy opponent.
With the opponent, have you done a cost-benefit analysis of what the developed country will gain versus what the developing will lose when skilled migrants are accepted?
Yes, we have. The developed country will be significantly improved, seeing as not only their products will be improved, and there might be lower prices for their products because there will be a lot of competition in the market, as well as their job population will be encouraged to educate themselves, as there will be competition in the job sector. But this is not true.
As my second speaker stated, the very fact that these persons left the country means that productivity is decreased. So the country actually stands to have a net loss from the loss of these persons.
And what is your source for this, my worthy opponent?
Worthy opponent, the International Organization for Migration. Okay. What if all developed countries stopped accepting skilled migrants? What do you think would happen to the skilled workers in developing countries?
They would stay and be unemployed.
But they can create employment for themselves. Foreign government can invest in them. They can use links
so
with
why
their
should the developed country be able to aid the developing country in only that way? Shouldn't they be able to take out some of the skilled migrants who cannot be employed?
But they are basically performing treason and theft because they are taking away the most valuable resources that these countries have, which is already scarce. So they are losing out.
They will not.
But the opponent, let me continue. Cuba has one of the best medical sectors in the world. Have you ever considered why?
Because of their high education levels.
And this high education, have you considered that they also have an embargo which limits the amount of persons that can actually go to developed countries, namely the United States?
Well, what has happened because of this?
First, the opposition rebuttal speaker.
Good morning, all. Your second speaker stated that developing countries have paid for their migrants' education, that it would be a waste of skills if they left. This is not true. Are you aware that most of these workers are bonded to their countries? And that they have to come back and serve for a certain amount of years before they leave. Your first speaker stated that Spain and Japan are looking for voluntary return programs. However, this only supports our argument, as when these migrants return home, they have significant contributions to make. Your first speaker stated that natives of developing countries developed countries, will suffer a lesser pay than the migrants. However, according to the IMF, they assert that skilled migrants have no negative effect on wages or salaries. You insinuated that migration gives benefits to only specific areas. This is not true. As our second speaker stated, through brain circulation, benefits are available to both developed and developing countries. The opponent's brain drain is an antiquated fallacy that needs to be debunked. In this era of the 21st century, we no longer have to be in a country to make a valid contribution. You stated that according to the IOM, there are more engineers in the US than Africa. But do you think that these engineers can be accepted into these countries? Due to attrition, our government cannot accept these workers. You stated that the emigration of skilled persons from developing countries has a negative impact on productivity. Do you know that immigrants actually bolster productivity, opponents? Furthermore, their skills are not wasted. They are developed, and through brain circulation, they are beneficial to all. Your second speaker stated that 90% of remittances are insignificant. Opponent, are you telling me that Grenada receiving $78.42 million worth of remittances is insignificant? Thank you.
And now we invite the proposition's rebuttal speaker to close the team's case and this match.
Good morning, all. We stand unwavering in our stance. Developed countries should not accept skilled migrants from developing nations. Your first speaker talked about discrimination and that everyone has the right to emigrate. This is true. However, every country has the right to deny these persons access into their country and control their borders. Remember that no right is an absolute right. She also stated that natives in developed countries prefer white-collar jobs while the immigrants will accept the lower-paying jobs. Opponents, when this happens, the employer benefits, and the result are persons who do not have enough to support their families and live in poverty. As my first speaker stated, immigrants who have been in the US for 20 years are more likely to live in poverty, lack health insurance, and access the welfare system than the native-born, introducing social strains. Your second speaker stated that these persons send back to their home and discuss remittances. As stated by my second speaker, more than 90% of remittances are spent on everyday consumption that does little to boost domestic production, employment, or exports, while increasing market volatility and inequality. It reduces the citizens' participation and contribution in the labor force and hinders growth of a country. The remittances being sent back, do you really think that this can cover for all the loss caused due to brain drain? Imagine the contributions that could have been made. Our opponents talked about the developed countries being able to gain. Opponents, this causes inequality as already developed benefits, developing brain drain. My second speaker stated migration depletes a country's meager supply of skilled manpower, which contributes nothing to the developed country. As my first speaker states, migration causes social strains. Your first speaker stated that there will be no jobs in the developing countries for these migrants. Migration is not needed. Opponents, these skilled persons can stay in their countries and be creative, create jobs, develop their country. Funds, the World Conference on Human Rights, the developing country should be
Congratulations to our winner, and thank you for joining us.
The Grenlec Debates. Vote for your favorite debater on our Facebook page. The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas.